following is a message from Christ Central Manchester, a church that meets in the heart of Manchester in the UK. To find out more about us, please visit www.christcentral.org.uk.
In all the excitement, I forgot to introduce myself this morning, which is important for those that maybe are guests here. My name's Keith. I'm one of the elders or pastors, leaders here at Christ Central. And this morning is a bit of a special occasion for us. We're looking at our vision for the future. And it's great that there's so many guests here this morning just to get a glimpse of maybe what we're going for as a church. But let's crack on with this morning. And as I said already, it is our Vision Sunday, kind of Mark 2. We had one a few weeks back. And that really was focusing more on our desire for where it all begins. So if we're going to move forward in God, where do we start? Well, we start with intimacy with Jesus, and we went there very strongly. I was very keen. If you haven't heard it, it might be helpful, because this morning we're going to get into more about what we do, whereas actually it all begins with intimacy with our dear Lord Jesus. It has to. We can't do anything without being connected to Him. And then we wanted to, from that, see more and more new salvation stories, if you remember. So it was intimacy with Jesus leading to new salvation stories that we looked at 3 weeks ago. And really a real hunger in our hearts for both, for Him and for people to come to know Him. And for us to hear stories continuously, more and more, of people that have come to know, crossed the line of faith and come to know Jesus. This morning, having spent time praying and seeking God as an eldership team, and when I say eldership, and when I say the word elder, it's the New Testament English translation of the word pastor or shepherd or leader. Some churches use the word vicar or minister. It's the word we use to describe the leadership team of 5 of us at the moment. And we've got together as an eldership recently and just prayed and spent time seeking God. And I want to explain this morning and flesh out where we feel, it's not just my ideas, but where we feel as a leadership we want to go in these next 3, 5, 10 years as a church. Bill Hybels, the American pastor, once said this, that vision is a picture of the future that produces passion. Vision is a picture of the future that produces passion. And I want this morning to inspire you, but more importantly, I want God to inspire you and get you in the guts, get you in the heart, get you in here with what He wants, with a biblically based vision for our church for the next 5 years and beyond. And I want this picture, as we look at it, and as God hopefully brings it home to you, I want it to produce a passion in you for Him, first of all, and for all that He's got for you as an individual and for us together as a church. But before we get on to that, I want to repeat where it starts. Having said that we were going to move on from 2 or 3 weeks ago, I want us to repeat it, because it must start with intimacy with Him. And I'm going to invite my wife Esther to come up and just take us back to this call of intimacy that God's been speaking to her about in particular.
Okay, hi, as Keith said, my name's Esther. I just want to share a few facts about myself with you. I'm mixed blood, so I'm half Indian. My mum is Indian, and she was a Hindu, and my dad's English, and they both became Christians in their 20s. I have an older brother who lives in Dubai, and I have a younger sister who lives in America. We moved to India when I was 3 years old, and I lived there for 16 years. And at the age of 10, I went to boarding school, and I used to suck my thumb till I was 9 years old, but I broke my wrist by falling down, and that actually stopped me sucking my thumb, so there's a good technique. I met Keith when I was 19, and we got married when I was 21, and we've been married 16 years. And we've got 2 children, Ethan and Naomi. So yeah. So there are just a few facts about me. And you know a little bit more about me. But I don't think any of you will be leaving this meeting and going, oh, I know Esther really well. I know her quite intimately. I think sometimes we can be like this with God. We know facts about Him. Oh yeah, He's loving. He's faithful. He sent His Son to die for me. But do we really know Him? And do we let Him really know us? Recently, I've heard preachers where the phrase intimacy with God has been used, and it's been highlighted. And I believe it's vital and key to our lives. And I think the whole reason we're here on earth is to worship our Creator. It says in Colossians 1, verse 16, "For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him." So I was cleaning my house, and I found myself thinking, what does intimacy with God mean for me practically? And possibly all of us automatically think, oh, it means longer quiet times with God. And by quiet times, I mean regular set-aside times where we pray and read the Bible. But I don't think that's just it. I don't think that's what it's all about. I'm one of these people who loves to have a prayer list. So if I say I'm going to pray for someone or something, it's on my list and I'm praying for it weekly. I'm praying for it regularly. I do believe God made me this way because I'm like this in a lot of other areas of my life. But so often I get caught up with my to-do list that I think I forget about spending intimate time with God. I looked up the word intimacy on Google, and this is what it said. Intimacy generally refers to the feeling of being in a close personal association and belonging together. It is a familiar and very close affective connection with another as a result of a bond that is formed through knowledge and experience of the other. Genuine intimacy in relationships requires dialogue, transparency, vulnerability, and reciprocity. I believe intimacy with God requires us talking to him, not just asking him for various answers. I believe it means being open with God. God looks at our hearts. He sees everything. And in 1 Samuel 16, verse 7, God says to Samuel that he's not about outward appearance. He looks at the heart. So don't try and hide things from God because he already knows all about it. But tell him about what's going on. And he knows us better than we know ourselves. Ask him into every area of your life. Intimacy with God is 24/7. It's not just in our quiet times. It's hearing him whisper something to us when we're washing up, when we're driving, when we're at work, when we're chatting to a friend, when we're falling asleep, or even during our sleep. And for example, the day before Dave and Mark were set aside as elders, it was a leisurely Saturday morning. I was just getting ready for the day. And I just felt God put the famous Esther verse in my mind for such a time as this. And I was like, oh, what's that about? And I felt God sort of tell me it's for Dave and Mark. And so I brought it on the Sunday. And other times, I'll just be doing something, not thinking about a certain person. And I'll just feel God say, what about this person? I'll think, I'm just going to text them. Ask them how they all are, or let them know I'm thinking of them. So I believe, God does that through us. And I heartily recommend quiet times with God and intimate quiet times with God. But make room for God all the time. Invite him into every circumstance, everything you're going through, and see how close you become to our incredible, loving Father. Belong and be close to God.
2 weeks ago, I told the story of James and John in the Gospel of John, wanting glory seats in heaven. They came to Jesus. In fact, it's so embarrassing. Their mum went to Jesus for them. Do you remember it? It's just like horrendous, so humiliating. Gone down in history as the mummy's boys. No, they haven't actually, but at that moment they were. John, they learn. So they go from wanting the glory seat, and by the end of his life, the aged John, the apostle, he had 2 phrases that he was famous for. One of them was, little children love one another. Apparently he would say it all the time, even when he was part, the legend is, it's not biblical, but the legend is that he would be almost carried into church meetings, and he would hardly be able to speak, but he would come to the front and he would say, dear children, love one another. He was in his 80s or approximately. He was famous for that one, but he was also famous for, in his letters, the 3 letters that he's written, separate to Revelation. He was famous for this phrase, remain in him, or abide in him. John, as one author put it that I read recently, was staggered by Jesus. Some of you have had or are having wonderful educations at university. John's university education was a couple of years with the dear Lord Jesus as he walked the earth. And it affected him forever. He was staggered by Jesus to the point where he referred to himself as the one Jesus loved. That was John. That was John who, yes, had an embarrassing moment where he got his mum to ask a silly question. But that was John who in the end understood that to be staggered by Jesus defined his life. And so that's why I was so keen that we went back there this morning, because our future as a church, as individuals, our good works, our loving each other as a church family, our seeing people's lives changed. When we see people's lives changed, it's going to be great. But it all will and all must come out of abiding in him, being staggered by Jesus and remaining intimate with him, not just in nice devotional times, which is important, but all the time. And so I'm really grateful for what Esther just shared. And as elders, we've prayed and felt God speak to us about this next phase and what it looks like. And so from intimacy, we want to look to grow. We want to look to affect and have an effect and have a significant impact wherever we are. We want to do those things from intimacy. And I see a vision of us as a church as we've prayed. And actually, I think it was Dave as we were praying as a group of leaders. Dave mentioned this idea of an open door into actually one of the areas we'll look at. But from that, I felt actually God wanted me today to kind of announce that we are a church of open doors. We're a church about open doors into different situations. We're a church that's going to have doors opened to us for us to walk through. In Revelation 3 verse 20, Jesus says these famous words, doesn't he? Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me. Jesus said, I stand at the door and I knock. Essentially, Jesus is saying that the door is an opportunity. The door is accessible. Now, it was written to a particular church in the early stages of Revelation, but it's got an application for all. He stands at the door and he knocks. And he creates this opportunity for us that we can open the door. We can let him in, or we can keep the door shut and keep him out. And I want us as a church, I believe we see this for the future of us as a church, that we would be a church that is like Jesus to people, that we're a collection, if you like, of open doors. I don't know if you've seen Monsters, Inc. I don't know if you've seen that brilliant animated film that our kids were young enough at the time for us to have the excuse to be allowed to watch it. It was all for them. But you know the doors scene, there's all these rows and rows of doors. I want us to be like that. A church, a family full of doors. Not so that monsters can come in and scare little children. That, if you haven't seen it, that's what that's about. It's a bit sick, really, but I don't know how they got away with it, to be honest. But we are to be this collection of open doors. We want to create series after series of opportunities for people to walk into God's blessing and ultimately into his family. And so our title is Open Doors this morning. And the 4 areas are these. An open door for the marginalised, an open door for the nations, an open door for new initiatives, and an open door for anyone. It's like a catch-all, just in case I've forgotten anyone. An open door for anyone. We'll come to it. First of all, an open door for the marginalised. This church, as you may already know, was started out of a real burden and heart for the downtrodden, the forgotten of our society. It started on the Swinton Valley estate, really wanting to reach out to people that society had forgotten. And we feel increasingly called and see a vision where this would happen even more. Not less, not holding back. That we would see lives powerfully impacted. And if you know anything about the work we do, you know that it's hard. If you know anybody that volunteers on the food bank, volunteers with CAP, which is our debt counselling centre that we run, it can be very difficult, but at times it can be very rewarding. It can be so deflating, but at other times incredibly moving when you see people's lives slowly or at times take a big leap in transformation. It can be incredibly moving. And we want to open doors and put unlocked opportunities, if you like, unlocked doors in front of people for them to walk through. Open doors so that they can leave the room of despair that they've been in, that has maybe taken them to the brink of suicide because of crippling debt or whatever it is that's taken them to that place of despair. We want them to come through that door and into an incredibly moving moment where they go from that despair into a room of hope and freedom and choice that they maybe didn't think they had, and peace that they've not had for a long time or ever, and wholeness that they may never have experienced. Friends, we get to do this stuff. Even if you don't ever go on a CAP debt counselling visit or help on the food bank, you as a church, we as a church are behind it wholeheartedly. We give to it. Our finance goes towards these things. We get behind it prayerfully. We support Mark and the teams of people that work on food bank and CAP. We get behind them. And we have prayed as leaders and feel that we can see God stepping up. And in Mark in particular, we've felt that there's going to be like a new level of compassion in him. In fact, I won't embarrass him too much, but he spent most of the evening that we were praying, I thought he had a hay fever attack, but he was just crying. And we're quite manly, but not that manly. And he wasn't embarrassed. I honestly felt I was about as compassionate as a punch in the face. I said, have you got a hay fever? No, I'm crying for the broken in our cities, Keith. He didn't quite say it like that, everybody else did. Yeah, well done, you pastoral-hearted guy. But we really felt, not just because he cried a bit, but we really felt God saying, there's a new level for you, Mark. There's a new stepping up, a level of compassion and brokenness that God's been doing in him already. And also we saw a level of fruitfulness in him and seeing more and more people come through that door. More and more people, as we put the opportunity before them, more and more people coming from that place of despair and brokenness into, as I've said, peace and hope. And so God's doing something in Mark, but I also would pray that God will not only do something in Mark, but will affect and infect the rest of us with this brokenness for people who desperately need help and with fruitfulness. Mark's recently found himself giving out Bibles to people from very, very different, let's call it religious background. Very different, who he had never imagined he would be giving Bibles to. I'll be as vague as I can about it. But staunchly not Christian people, he was giving Bibles to. And I think there's going to be more of that. And God's doing something in him, and let it be for us as well. So the future for us as a church looks like more of us opening doors, more open doors for those who the Bible describes as, actually in the Old Testament, as widows and orphans and foreigners as well. The Bible describes the call of God upon his people, the people of Israel, to look after the orphans, look after the widows, and actually look after the foreigners. And let's be honest, with all that's going on in the media at the moment, everybody's a foreigner to somebody. Right? Even if you're white, British, 100th generation, which isn't possible, but some people probably think they are, that read certain newspapers, but I'm not going to go there. We're all foreigners to somebody, and God calls us, especially when you see the thread of the call to the nations throughout the whole of the Bible. There is no excuse for the thin edge of the wedge of racism that there currently is in our media. We've got to be so wary of it. We're called to look after widows and orphans and foreigners in the Old Testament, and that doesn't change in the New Testament, it only increases. We're called to look after widows. We might not have many widows, but perhaps we'll have single parents that could be widows, but they might be single parents for other reasons. We're called to look after them. We're called to look after orphans who might not have had their parents die, but they might be in a situation where their parents either can't provide for them, and therefore we want to get in there and help the parents provide, or their parents can't look after them at all, they're unable to. We want to help in those situations as well. We're called to those people, and then we're called to foreigners as well. And we've talked about that in previous weeks, that this refugee crisis, which is what it is, it's not an immigrant crisis, it's a refugee crisis, that when it comes to our shores, we want to be there to help with these. They're not a problem, these dear people. They're not an issue, they're not a topic, they're not a policy change, they're people. And I didn't realise this, but there are going to be, if they're allowed in, there are going to be lots and lots of unaccompanied children. I don't even know how that happens, but it's already happening in places like Germany. There's homes being set up by churches working together in Berlin, I've heard about this week. Churches working together in Berlin, setting up homes for children who they know are coming, who are not accompanied by anybody. And that means anybody under the age of 16. And so we want to be ready for that. We want to be also ready, as we'll come on to in a moment, we want to be ready for helping those people that turn up on our doorstep without 2 pennies to rub together because they've run away from a situation which they meant they didn't want to stay in their home anymore. That must mean it was bad, usually. So we want to be there for them. So that's our first open door to the marginalised and the forgotten. Second open door is for the nations, which obviously does connect, but it's slightly different. We want to be... Now, let me explain this. We want to be a resource base, and sometimes you'll hear the word or the phrase apostolic base. We want to be an apostolic base. Resource base is an easier way of understanding what I mean, but it's a bit like the situation we see in the book of Acts in Antioch. They have become famous for defining what we mean by resource base, because that's where this phrase Antioch or apostolic base comes from. And I want to just explain what I mean. Apostolic literally means sent one, to send. But the kind of full narrated biblical definition of the word apostolic is way more than that. Now the problem is, in churches like ours or in movements like ours, apostolic can end up becoming a verb, and it can end up being used and bandied about, and no one actually knows what on earth anyone's talking about anymore. Yeah, I felt that apostolically. I thought that was an apostolic situation. It was really apostolic. What do you mean? I don't know. It was good. And we do that, and I'll come on to that later on when we're talking about the open door for anyone. We've got to be so careful of Christian lingo and Christianisms. It's just embarrassing sometimes. What we mean, and what people generally probably mean when they say the word apostolic, is, yes, sent, but sent probably, especially when we're talking about an Antioch base or an apostolic base, we want to be a church in the full biblical definition, which means to send and to carry the gospel message, to see churches planted, to see churches established and churches encouraged in what they're already doing, to build up Christians, to eventually affect the fact that many more people will come to know Jesus. That's got to be part of it as well. What we see Paul doing in the New Testament is what we would mean by apostolic. When he went on his travels and did the stuff, that's what we mean by apostolic. And we want to be that. And we are called, in fact, I believe every church is called to be an apostolic base. I don't think anyone gets out of it. Well, we definitely don't. We're called to be an Antioch base. We're already doing it. We haven't always done it to the extent that we do now, but it will only increase. And in Acts 13, we see it. We see Paul and Barnabas set apart by the church in Antioch, which is exactly what I'm talking about, set apart to go off and help plant churches, preach the gospel, carry the message of Jesus, which is what we mean by the gospel. Paul is the famous one that we all know about. Barnabas less so. And there would have been hundreds and thousands of others that would have been scattered or sent from one church to other areas throughout that period who are not known, who are unknown, that we don't know the names of. And friends, this morning, if it's Jeremy and Anne, who are on our leadership team, if it's them going to Canada, or maybe Graham, who's on a leadership team, going to Leeds, or me going to Chester. These things all do happen already. We are a sending base. We're sending us to these different places to help encourage people, to help encourage church planting, to help encourage people coming to know Jesus. It's all part of that being an Antioch, being an apostolic base. And that is a door we want to keep wide open. It's a calling we feel very strongly we must keep attending to. But it could also be someone like Laura, who sat there when she went off to Mozambique, or Claire in India, who's there at the moment. Some people will get more airtime than others. Paul is spoken about more in the New Testament than the others. Doesn't mean Paul's more valuable. It's just the way it is. And actually what Jeremy and Anne do, they don't just travel, they're not just sent by us, they actually look after about 100 churches, which sounds like a big task, doesn't it? But they do that through team. And they go off to Canada and Zambia, and we are their home base. And it's important that we take it seriously, what we are responsible for. We're responsible for holding a door open for them and sending them out, not kicking them out. Go on, you swan off to Canada again and have a nice jolly. No, that's not what they're doing. They come back completely cream-crackered, is the Christian way of saying it. They come back worn out. You think, what, by doing Christian meetings? Yeah, you wouldn't believe it. Maybe you would. We want to be that open door saying, we're sending you, we're waving you off, and then when you come back, come in, tell us all about it. We see it in Acts 13 and 14. Paul and Barnabas go off for ages. They haven't got aeroplanes to swan about quickly, but they come back and they take months to debrief the church in Antioch about all that they've done. We kind of think, oh, seriously, we've got to hear about Canada again? They went on about it for months. And I think there's a call upon us that we have to take seriously. This is an apostolic base with an important mandate to the nations that are in Manchester and Salford, as Pastor Joshua was so helpfully explaining. I think it's the most amount of languages in the UK in one city, in Manchester, or maybe it's even in Europe. We have a real privilege to serve the nations among us. But we have this incredible privilege to send people, and Jeremy and Anne especially, as they look after so much outside of the UK and in the UK. I've kind of touched on it already, but this sending of Jeremy and Anne, of Laura, of Claire, of others, of me to Chester, Graham to Leeds, it's not just about church workers going off to the mission field. We've kind of lost that terminology because it's been unhelpful. Sending people to the nations must include sending people to the UK. Because the UK is full of foreigners, and I don't mean that in a racist way at all. The UK is full of people who are foreign to God still. They're foreign to him. He doesn't know, they don't know him. He knows them, they don't know him. We're full of it. We think we're a Christian nation. If we're a Christian nation, then I'm a world-class international brain surgeon. I'm not. In case. We're not a Christian nation by any stretch of the imagination. And so we send not only Jeremy and Anne to Canada and Zambia and Scandinavia and South America and wherever they go next, we send Roz, who sat over there, into her hospital role. We send Anne-Marie, who sat there. I kind of know where you normally sit. It's quite helpful. Thank you. Christians, eh? We sit where we sit. Anne-Marie we send into her role, working in education. Mark Biles, is he here? He's usually sat around there somewhere. Mark we send into his role, teaching music to children. We see an open door more and more for you, UK missionaries and apostolic workers. That's what you are. You are. I'm not making it up. You are. We've kind of reserved it for this special Christian elite, leadership elite. It isn't that. It is that, but it's also all of us. As you go into your situation, encountering Jesus on a daily basis, coming out of that intimacy, raring to go, finding that he still loves you on a daily basis, being staggered again by him, being equipped by him, coming in here on a Sunday, being equipped together, looking at his lovely grace for us, his wonderful ways with us, looking at his Bible together, and then being sent out, just as Paul and Barnabas were, to the regions around the Mediterranean. As we send people overseas, we send each other to our day jobs that God called you to and me to. He's called us to a job, even if you don't feel it's exactly your calling in life, because it's maybe a stepping stone to something else. He's still called you to that for now. Right? Even if it's the job that you don't want to do because you'd rather do that job. He's called you for now to that. And so I can say it wholeheartedly. We send each other out. We finish here on a Sunday morning. The week's just beginning. Come on. You might come through this door on a Sunday morning on your last legs, and we want you to be bandaged up, met with by God, instructed by him, nourished by a kind of 3-course meal with him, so that all of us pile back out of those doors, these wide doors, ready to take on the world again, staggered by Jesus and thrust out into all that he's got for us. And as we were praying, Jeremy, who I've just been talking about, he's one of the leaders here, he was reminded of the passage in Isaiah 2 where the mountain of the Lord in the last days, which is the church, is seen as a source of comfort for the nations, that the nations will come in and then go out, and the blessing will go out with them. And I felt that this open door picture for us was of us coming in and then us going out. Not just to the nations overseas, but the nations among us in the UK and the nation of people who are even British, who are still foreign to God. So it's an open door for the marginalised, first of all, an open door for the nations, and then, thirdly, we see an open door for new initiatives. You might not know what on earth that's going to be getting at. We want to have an open door for opportunity for new ideas, new initiatives. This isn't some sort of strategy, political theory. This is our heart, but Lord, help me to try and explain what's on our hearts. We don't want to be a top-down, heavy control, centrally governed church. That means you can't sneeze without permission. Hopefully you don't feel that already, but we want to kind of, because sometimes people come from other churches where maybe that has been more the culture. And you're not allowed to do stuff unless you've run it past 15 committees and a leadership team have given you the tick to say, yeah, you can go do that thing. If you feel God calls you to start a community group in your workplace, you don't need permission. Just do it. If you feel you want to run a carol service at work, don't ask for permission. Yeah, we could pray for you and get behind you, but go for it. If you want to reach out to the elderly in your area or run music lessons or start a gardening club or start a regular night, which was fantastic, by the way, the one we had on Wednesday night in Starbucks, massive success. But if you wanted to do something like that regularly, nothing to do with the students and 20s group that was kind of for and about. If you wanted to do something like that or run a debating evening or anything or just anything, I'm trying to come up with ideas. You come up with them. That's the point. You don't need permission, just go for it. And again, as we were praying, Graham went back to the story of Jonathan and his armor bearer in 1 Samuel 14. He voiced this heart of ours, which is that we want you to have permission. Jonathan says to his armor bearer, his mate, you see that Philistine outpost? What do you reckon? Shall we give it a go? That isn't how you decide a lot of things in churches nowadays. They didn't have a committee. They didn't pray about it for 3 months. Seek the Lord. Get peace on the issue. And I'm not saying those things are wrong at all. But sometimes God just says, go on in. Have a go. Or maybe he doesn't even say, go on and have a go. You think, I'm going to have a go. I'm going to do that. Yes, do it! As long as it's not sinful or unbiblical, go for it. So Jonathan says to his young assistant, let's have a go at this Philistine outpost. Perhaps, man of faith, perhaps God will give us success. Maybe a carol service at work will work. It might fall flat on its face. Be a laugh though, be quite good fun. Let's do it. Friends, Jesus said to his disciples, go into a town and preach the gospel, and if they don't listen, leave. That's my shorthand for it. He says, kind of brush your feet off and say, see ya to them. He didn't say, write up a risk assessment, pray for a month, and see if that town is on God's heart. Every town's on God's heart, right? Every workplace is on God's heart, unless you work somewhere criminal. Jonathan essentially says to his mate, go on, let's have a go. And some of you have been doing that recently with the whole outreach before Alpha. Same night as Alpha, standing in the northern quarter with chocolates, seeing what will happen. Not eating the chocolates, giving them out. Although, yeah, I haven't been there, so they probably have been giving them out. I would have been eating them. They've been doing that. They've been having a go. No, they didn't come and get permission, I don't think. That isn't our culture, and I'm just trying to make it loud and proud. That isn't our culture. Please have a go. Please feel God leading you into something and go for it. There's an open door for anyone to try anything. You are the light of the world. Not you are light of the world, but make sure you spend 15 hours in committees and discuss everything with leaders before you try anything. And then lastly, number 4, open door for anyone. An open door for anyone. Like I said, it's a bit of a catch-all. But coming back to this intimacy leading to outreach, which I think as Christians we often think are poles apart. You know, I'm intimate with Jesus, and then on another day I have to talk to people about Jesus. I don't get how they're connected. No, they are connected. Coming back to that, we're struck by this sense that one leads to the other. As we love Jesus more, we'll be sent out. We'll be sent out. Matthew 28, go and make disciples of all nations. That was said to guys who knew him the best. They knew him intimately, they knew him well, and they went out. And they changed the world, and millions of people since then have come to know Jesus themselves intimately. Some of you, this morning I sat there thinking, when is he going to talk about numbers? I thought vision was all about numbers and growth. Maybe none of you are. Maybe the postmodern generation isn't bothered about numbers. Or postmodern, whatever we are now. But before we get into any kind of talk about numbers, and I'm only going to briefly go there, how wide open is our front door? And it is about our Sunday mornings, but it isn't just. How wide open are you for people who don't know Jesus? How easy is it for a person who does not know Jesus yet to get to know you and then get to know Jesus? How easy is it for them to come here on a Sunday and feel welcomed, at home, relaxed, not weirded out by unnecessary church lingo? How open is our front door? Because we want to meet with Jesus. We want to know intimacy with him on a daily basis. This is about you as an individual on a daily basis, and this is about us together corporately, which is actually about us individually as we go about our Sunday mornings. And we want to meet with Jesus. We want to be staggered by him. We want to hear salvation stories that are new and more of them. But how wide open is our door? Who are you, again on the individual basis now, who are you individually persistently praying for? Who are you seeking to draw closer to God? Now, this is a challenge for all of us, and I include me. Because at times, if I'm honest, I think they're never, ever, ever going to move from that place they are in, which is kind of indifferent to anything that I say about God, anywhere nearer to him. I can't see it ever happening. And so I kind of begin to give up, if I'm honest. I begin to invite them less to stuff that's happening. I begin to pray for them less. So I'm not just preaching and telling you something that I'm not taking on board myself. Who are you? Who am I persistently praying for? People that don't know Jesus yet, that we are desperate that they would know him. Who are you seeking to draw closer to him? Who would you invite to the Andy Kind event on Tuesday night in 2 nights' time? You've got 2 days yet. For a lot of people, that's planning ahead of time. That's really organised if you invite somebody 2 days in advance. Maybe. It's not even an age thing. Who are you? Who could you invite to Tuesday night? It will, I promise you, it will be relaxed. Andy kind of is funny. I've heard him a few times. He makes me laugh, and I don't laugh at everything. He is a really funny guy, and he's a Christian. So it will be clean, it will be funny, and he will do this, as I've said, this low-key plug for Alpha. So I really would recommend it, not just for people that are warm to Christianity, or you've talked to about God already a lot. You could invite anyone, really anyone, to this, even if they are staunch atheists. And then what are we like with new people? What are you like with new people that you meet on the bus? What are you like with new people that are here in the bar area after the morning service? Because that's just as important. How wide do we want our front door to be? I did high. How wide do we want our front door to be here at the Comedy Store? Which just happens to be where we meet as a church. We're about the people, right? But there is a door that I'm trying to use as an analogy. How wide open are our hearts? Is our heart corporately for those who are here for the first time, who maybe don't even know God, who are here from a different denomination, and so using the lingo that we use in our network of churches might not fit their brain, they might not understand the words we use. What are we like? How wide do we want the door to be? I see a church, I see a vision of us with a door off its hinges. The door's no longer there. The hinges have been kicked off as well. There's like this massive open void space. It's drafty with a door off its hinges. The drafts will include, and it will annoy you, especially if you're wearing shorts. I don't know why I said that. I'm thinking of you, mate. You're always wearing shorts. It's like middle of December and it's minus 15 and Dave's got shorts on. These two lads are the same. They come to church with shorts and a hat on. It's like their heads are cold, but their legs are... I don't know why I went there. It's going to be drafty. It's going to be drafty. There's going to be things that annoy you, like a draft does. A draft hits your legs, makes them cold. You get goosebumps. It's annoying. We're going to get annoyed sometimes when I repeatedly explain the words grace, redemption, elder. I know what they mean. I've been a Christian for 400 years, Keith, and you're explaining the word grace again! Yeah, but there's a guest here who thinks we're fruitcakes and has never heard the word elder apart from when they see a Mormon talking to them on the street. And he's 15, and he's got Elder Stephen, and he's from America. That's the only time that they ever hear the word elder, if they're new to church. They got it. Or they laughed. Thank you. We will get annoyed that it's not all about us, Christians. We will keep explaining words that are a bit different for people. We want to thank God for intimacy with Jesus in worship, but thank God for worship that doesn't go on for an hour and a half, because I've brought my friend who's interested a little bit in church and God. I brought them to church for the first time, and they sat down after 20 minutes. And if we'd been worshipping for an hour and a half, she would have never come back again. But we worshipped for about 45 minutes, roughly. Partly because that's long enough for us to get staggered by Jesus, but also partly because we don't want to alienate people. And I've heard people say this. I think it was you, Liz, when we brought a friend along who didn't know Jesus. I think it was you. When we brought a friend along who doesn't know Jesus, if it wasn't, it doesn't matter. It was a good thing. I was so pleased for the things that we do already do, because when they came, it felt very different. Suddenly I was aware of what they're going through. That we need to be thinking like that. We want to meet with Jesus every Sunday and be intimate with him, but at the same time be aware. Friends, how wide doors are open? How wide open is our door? I'm nearly finished. The door's wide, but it can still come off its hinges, I believe. Even this week, I sent an email out to the people that do our notices and just added in a few little things that we need to not say. For a long time, we've been calling the person that leads the meeting the anchor. Now, I think it might have been my idea, right? What does the word anchor mean? Apart from in a newsroom in America. Not very much. So we're not going to introduce people as the anchor anymore. We're going to say it's the person leading the meeting. Now, we know Jesus is leading the meeting, but it's helpful just to say to everybody, if you want to say something or bring something to contribute to the morning, then this is the person you go and talk to. Not the anchor, or whatever word. And tongues. Let's try not to use the word tongues. I know this is me telling you how to suck eggs, but languages is a lot more helpful than they all speak in tongues. Well, that was really weird, churches. Yeah, well, we are probably still weird enough for people, but we can be more helpful. If we grew by 10% over the next 5 years through a very wide door, open door to new initiatives, an open door to the nations, an open door to the marginalised, if we grew by 10% every year, this is me talking about numbers now very quickly, we would grow to about 250 in 5 years. So do you know what I'm praying for? I'm praying for 300 because that's more than that. I'm praying that we would grow to 300 in 5 years. Now some of you are thinking, yeah, whatever. And some of you are thinking, is that all? 305 years. We're about 160 at the moment with 130 adults and 30 children or youth. So to double in 5 years, that's what I'm praying for. I'm praying for it because I don't think naturally we could do it. I'm praying for it because God's got to do something. Why do we want to grow? Because we want to keep being there for each other. We want to keep encountering Jesus together in small and large groups. And we want to affect even more people. And with more people, you can affect more people. And so those 300 people would end up looking like 30 community groups. Because at the moment we have about 9 or 10. We want to grow to about 30 because we want everybody to be in community with each other. It will mean, in the next 5 years, dozens of people getting baptised. Again, why do we want to get bigger? Not just so that we get bigger. If we do that, forget it. Sack me now. Forget it. Let's just give up. We're not just about wanting to be bigger for our own sake. We want to see we want to hear new salvation stories. And unless loads of people move away at the same time as loads of people become Christians, we will grow. Unless half the church empties out and goes off to Leeds or Canada or somewhere, we will grow if we see lots and lots of new salvation stories and baptisms. We will. And then, like I've said already, we will then see, as more and more people cross the line of faith, we will then see them impacting their workplaces as they're sent out apostolically. I've done it. As we send each other out to the nations and to the nation of the UK, sent ones, then we will see even more of an impact. And as we join with other churches from other denominations and church networks across Manchester, which you know is on my heart, I was with a load of them on Friday morning, which is where I heard about the Berlin thing. We want to see thousands and tens of thousands of the 3 million in Manchester and Salford that don't know Jesus. We want to see them cross the line of faith. It's a massive, massive task. And some of you are thinking, 300 isn't really that impressive, Keith. I'll tell you what, it's enough for me to get going with, and it's enough for us to get going with. And those 300 would then be 300, like the Monsters Inc. analogy, 300 open doors, 300 opportunities for people, other people, to come in and to join and to be part of this incredible family of God that we are part of across the world. So I'd love us to pray. I'd love the band to come up. Please. Let's stand together. I'm just going to pray. We've gone a bit over time, so in a minute I'm going to invite parents to go in. But before you do that, just a couple of minutes. In a minute I'll ask the parents to go and pick up their children. Let's just pray together. God, make us an open door. Make us a community of open doors. An open door for the marginalised and downtrodden. An open door for the nations and to the nations. An open door for new ideas and initiatives. Jonathan and his armour bearer all over the place. An open door for anyone who might grace us by coming through this front door here. Lord, put it in our hearts. Lord, as we worship right now, put it in our hearts that I'm an open door for somebody else to walk through and be part of your family. Let us corporately be seen as open doors to bless the nations, to resource work overseas. Thank you for the privilege of being involved overseas and all that we're involved in already. Lord, that we would send each other out and get behind each other into our different callings, our different day jobs, as it were. To go for new ideas that you're calling us to, or even just we get an idea and we think, yeah, let's try it. That we would create space, we would create a door, we would knock a door off its hinges, Lord God, in trying to create space for anyone and everyone to draw close to you, our staggering Lord Jesus. This morning we love you, Lord. We ask, would you do all that we're looking to see you do through us, Lord? We know this is bigger than us. Your word says, Lord, the Bible says that you can do even more than we ask or imagine. Lord, we can imagine quite a lot, and yet you can do more than that. Lead us, Lord, please. Lead me. Lord, we need you. As we worship right now, I pray we would draw close to you. Take us on, Lord Jesus.